Hi, I'm Stephen Kendis, author of Hunting the First State, and many of you know that I cook a lot of wild game because I hunt in Delaware, Maryland, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. But today I'm also going to show you that I'm a gardener as well. I'm going to present a recipe for making your own tomato sauce or spaghetti sauce or tomato gravy from frozen tomatoes from your garden. Through trial and error, I think I've come up with a very good, very fast, very efficient recipe for making tomato sauce from, again, your own tomatoes from your own garden. I don't can the tomatoes, I don't blanch the tomatoes and pull the skin. I just use frozen tomatoes that I collect from the garden. It doesn't matter which type of tomato it is as long as they're red, ripe tomatoes. I believe in this bag, as an example, I have some plum tomatoes, some beefsteak tomatoes, some big boy and better boy tomatoes. Whatever I have, I just cut the core out or cut any bad spots out before I freeze them. I put them in a sealable bag and I just freeze them. So these tomatoes are from this past growing season. It's December now. They were probably harvested in July and August and September. And I'm just now using them. They, as you can see, they are still frozen solid. They feel like softballs instead of tomatoes. But we're going to cook them down and use those tomatoes for the base of the tomato sauce. Making tomato sauce, whether you're using your own tomatoes or canned tomatoes, is a fairly straightforward process. Just some common ingredients that we use. I have about maybe 3/4 of a cup of onion, about 1/2 a cup of garlic. They're all finely chopped. I actually use a food processor to do that, and you'll see why. I'll show you why they're finely chopped. I'm going to saute the onions and garlic in some olive oil, and then when we season the sauce, you will have basil, salt, and black pepper. And I want to show you a special tool that I think is very important to use when you're making sauce. Again, we're not peeling the tomatoes. We're not using pre-peeled tomatoes from a can. We're not blanching them first. They are frozen solid tomatoes with the skin still on. And this handy hand mixer here, or hand blender, will be what we use to make the tomatoes a very fine consistency for the sauce. And you'll see that using this tool, it will actually suck the tomato skins onto this blade, and when they adhere to it, you can just bang the skins off into a trash can, and it removes the skins from the sauce. It's a very efficient way to do it. I do like to keep the skins in the sauce for a while. I think it gives the sauce itself a much better flavor and gives it a nice, deep, dark red color. And there are two ways you can make sauce. You can cook your tomatoes down for a long time until it thickens up, or you'll see what I do is I use tomato paste as well in the final stage of the process, and it will thicken the sauce up as well as contribute to that deep red color and that rich taste. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is plain and simple. We're going to dump our tomatoes in the pot. It's going to take a while for these tomatoes to cook down. So I advise, if you're marking an entire day off your calendar to make sauce, start just by cooking your tomatoes down first thing in the morning. So I'll just dump these tomatoes in this giant pot. Again, I'm going to make a lot, so I have a big pot. I'll dump these in frozen. You'll hear them sound like softballs more than tomatoes, or golf balls. And I do have other tomatoes I'm going to add. And as I mentioned, they're varied types of tomatoes. As I'm getting ice chips all over the place. But again, I have about, if I had to guess, I'd say there are maybe 8 to 10 pounds of tomatoes here. And then I'm just going to let those tomatoes simmer. And just let them cook down. And it may take hours until the tomatoes themselves break up, but it's okay. Just let them cook down, let the fibers break down, let the skins begin to come off, and then we will use our hand blender to mix those tomatoes up and to grab the skins out of the pot. Okay, it's been about an hour and a half that our tomatoes have been cooking. They're starting to break down. If you want to come take a look, I've had the lid on, and as you can see, the tomatoes are starting to break down. The sauce is starting to thicken up. I'm just going to go ahead and stir this every 10 minutes or so. Try to help break up these tomatoes. You can see the skins and the seeds are adhering to the spoon. Go ahead and bang those skins off. The seeds themselves will cook and disintegrate. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll take the skins out with the hand mixer. But just to aid the process along, it's good to stir this every 10 minutes or so. And it looks like at this rate, in about another hour, hour and a half or so, we should be able to go ahead and use the hand mixer. I'm just going to close the lid, let this cook for another 90 minutes or so, and we'll go from there. Okay, so our tomatoes have been cooking for about 2.5 hours or so. They're pretty well broken down. If you take a look in the pot, you can see that the majority of the fibers are broken down in the tomatoes, and skin sort of floating to the top. Skin sticks to the spoon. So what we're going to do now is use a hand mixer or hand blender to break up the rest of the tomatoes, and it will also help us get the skins out. I use a Phillips hand blender / hand chopper for grinding up the tomatoes and grabbing the skins. I don't really endorse any specific product for this. This just happens to be the one that I use. It has 4 separate speed or power settings, a long wand, and the blade, which helps you grab the tomato skins and grind the tomatoes up, and you'll see that the skins will actually adhere to the outer ring of this wand. So I just set it at the lowest setting, which is 1. Drop into the pot, turn it on, and just begin mixing the tomatoes up. You have to sort of go at varying depths, go up, go down. But you'll realize quickly, because we have the skins in here, that the skins will adhere to the wand. So that's how we're going to remove our skins. And you also get some of the seeds in there. But I want to make sure I bang off the tomato pulp itself, the fruit of the tomato. So I don't want to throw that out. So I try to get as much of the liquid out as I can. And then I'll just bang this off to the trash can. So I can take this off, open my trash can here, and without making too much of a mess, just bang those skins into the trash can. Close it, put your wand back on, and go again. And maybe after 5 or 6 or 7 times of blending the tomatoes up, you have a nice thick consistency of your sauce, and you'll have most of the skins removed. I don't think this is a method where you can remove 100% of the skins, but if you do this thoroughly, you can remove most of them. And I will tell you, this method sure beats blanching tomatoes or using different food grinders and tomato processing equipment and such. This is what I found the easiest way to do it. You still get the flavor from the skin, so when it cooks down, you get that flavor extracted, and then you can just discard the skins when the tomatoes break down. I've made about 6 passes through the sauce with the hand mixer. It definitely helped me grind up the remaining tomato chunks as well as remove the vast majority of the skins. I try not to use the mixer extensively or more than 6, 7, 8 times, because then your sauce gets a little too soupy and then you will have to cook it longer to thicken it up or add more tomato paste. But if you take a look, you can see the consistency of the sauce now. The majority of the skins are gone. You will still see some seeds, but they will dissipate with more cooking. But I can run my spoon through. It's picking up a few skins here and there, but not many. And as I stir, I'll bang the spoon off in the trash can as well. But as you can look, it's definitely taking the form of a nice marinara sauce. Now we will thicken it up later with some tomato paste, and I will let it cook down some more for another couple hours or so at very low heat, and it will thicken naturally, but we will also use some tomato paste to thicken it up. So our tomatoes have been cooking for about 2.5 to 3 hours, and while there is a good consistency of the sauce, it really is just boiled down tomatoes right now. So now we're going to add some other ingredients to give it more of a tomato sauce or marinara sauce flavor. And I'll start by just heating my frying pan, maybe a medium heat. And then I'm going to pour my olive oil. That's probably about a quarter or a third of a cup of olive oil in the pan. Let that oil heat up. Then I'm also going to add my onions and garlic that we mentioned earlier. Garlic, finely chopped. Onion, finely chopped. And now that I see this, I'm going to maybe subtract a little bit of that, maybe give it more of a 1-to-1 ratio of onions and garlic. Stir that around in the saucepan. Stir that around the frying pan. And we'll let those flavors cook together. The oil will heat, the onion and the garlic will mix. At this point, I also like to add just a little bit of coarse sea salt. That will help extract the flavors from the onions and garlic. And once this olive oil, onion, garlic mixture begins to turn brown, you get a very nice aroma. We're just going to dump that directly into the pot of sauce. Our onions and garlic and olive oil have been cooking for about 5, 6, 7 minutes or so. The onions and garlic are becoming translucent, just starting to get a little bit of a golden brown color, which is what we want. And now I'm just going to dump all of this into the pot of tomatoes. So let's take my lid off. Go ahead and just dump all of that in. Oil, onions, garlic, everything. Scrape the pan, get it in. This will give your tomatoes a nice flavor. Get as much in there as you can. And again, this is just to taste, so you can add or subtract for your own personal recipe. And perhaps you may taste your sauce in an hour or so after it begins to cook together. You may want to add some more garlic or some more onions. That's something to do. After I add my olive oil, onions, and garlic, I'm going to add basil. You can use fresh basil. You can use dried basil, whatever you have. I just happen to have some dried basil, and I just put basil in based upon feel and look. So I've been doing this long enough where I just know how much basil to use based upon how much I see in the sauce. So I'll sprinkle some in, I will stir, and I'll see how many green flakes I see mixed throughout the sauce. And my goal is to, if I grab a spoonful of sauce, I should at least have 1, maybe 2 flakes of basil in there. You don't want to put a lot of basil in, you don't want it to be overpowering. Some people put oregano in their sauce. I don't like doing that. It tastes more like pizza sauce instead of pasta sauce. So I just keep sprinkling it and stirring it until I see some green flakes mixed throughout. And that gives me a good idea of how much basil is in. And currently you can still see the seeds, but the seeds will be gone for the most part when we're finished.
And you can tell that the sauce is still a little soupy right now. So we're going to let it cook some more, let it cook down, thicken up, and we'll speed that process along by adding tomato paste. To aid the process of thickening the sauce, we're going to use some tomato paste. I could let the sauce cook down for several more hours and it will thicken up, but unfortunately you'll lose a lot of the liquid to evaporation. And since I worked hard to grow these tomatoes and I harvested them and there's no more left until spring, I'm going to try to get the greatest yield I can out of using these tomatoes. So I'm going to add tomato paste to this existing sauce to thicken it up and then let it cook down to get the consistency that I want. Using tomato paste, it doesn't really matter what kind of tomato paste you use, at least not in my opinion. I just go with whatever is on sale, quite frankly. And I add it to the tomatoes and it gives the sauce a nice thick consistency, a nice deep dark red color, and it gives it a very good rich flavor. So with the amount of tomatoes I have here, I'm going to use 4 of these 18-ounce cans. And I may have to add 1 or 2 more later, but I'll let the sauce cook first to see how thick it becomes, and then I'll add them as necessary later on. Okay, it's been about 30 minutes since I've added the tomato paste, and you can see that the sauce really thickened up. If you look in the pot, the sauce is nice and thick. You can see some basil in there, you can see some onions and some garlic. And I like to give the sauce what I call the spoon test. If I put the spoon in there and it stands up, I say it's the right consistency. As you can see, the spoon's not falling over. It's nice and thick. I'll continue to cook that for another hour or two just to get the flavors to mix themselves together. But for all intents and purposes, it's done. If you wanted to cook meatballs or sausage or pork, you could also cook that and add it to your sauce to give it a meaty flavor. But as far as I'm concerned, I'll give it the taste test. I may add a little more salt, a little more black pepper, maybe onions or garlic, and I just make that, I finish it off to taste. I do want to caution people not to add a lot of salt to your sauce, to your personal liking, because sometimes if you have guests, they don't like a lot of salt, they can always add their salt when you serve it if they feel the need. So I put a little bit of salt, not a lot, but that's how you make tomato sauce or marinara sauce, spaghetti sauce, or tomato gravy from your own frozen tomatoes.